FAMU just dug into the transfer portal and pulled out potentially a superstar quarterback. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, I'm Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Amazon 4K or Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. FAMU may have just pulled in a potential superstar out of the transfer portal. And I understand that this is late. And typically, I'm not expecting anybody who comes in through the portal in the end of April, beginning of May, that spring semester season. I'm not really expecting huge impact players. But if you can get a quarterback in the portal, there are circumstances, there are scenarios where I do look at them as potential impact players, because sometimes you can have a quarterback who just loses a battle during the spring. They're still really quality. The thing about quarterback that is separate from other positions is there's only going to be one on the field. And most people, yes, you have to go to your backup sometimes, but a lot of high quality players don't want to be a backup. That's just the truth of the matter. Now, I'm not going to try to get into the understandings of why CJ Montes left Fordham, but I'm going to tell you this right now. Getting Montes in the portal, to me, opens up so many possibilities for FAMU, because at the end of the day, you need a quarterback who is going to lead you to the promised land. You go through and you look at the past couple of SWAC champions, you look at the past couple of HBCU champions. I could look at the FAMU versus Howard game, and I think a lot of people would point to the Howard quarterback not showing up in that matchup. I could point to Davius Richard. I don't think I'll point to Corey Fields. I don't think I go back that far and feel that way. But if we're keeping it to the SWAC, Shedeur, Musa, Morgan, and feel how you want to feel about those players. I think that Shedeur showed up consistently. I thought that Musa, he was hot and cold, but you knew he could give you something. You look at Morgan, and I thought he showed up big time in a lot of good moments. So, in general, that quarterback position is going to be extremely important. And I know I didn't need to go to specific SWAC examples to highlight that. Everybody knows how important the quarterback position is. So getting a quality player is something that is always going to be valuable. And when I look at the portal, if you can only have one in every place, there's probably more quality quarterbacks in the portal than other positions, or at least ones that I'll expect more out of than comparing them to other positions. And I think that FAMU got one of those guys in CJ Montes. I really think that Montes is a guy who, you look at what he did in his 2023 season at Fordham, because he didn't play much in 24. That's the thing that's really important, is you have to compare CJ's first season at Fordham. Let me tell you what, this is his third time transferring, but I don't care what he did at New Mexico, because if you didn't play great on the FBS level, you're stepping down to subdivision. So that's number one. Number two, if I've seen you do it at the FCS level, I'm going to expect you to be able to do it again. This is not, I think that in most progressions of football, we view it as upward trajectory. And that's a lot of time when we talk about proving things. So let's say you have a quarterback who comes from New Mexico, like Montes did. Montes came from New Mexico to Fordham. When he went to Fordham, he had to prove who he was from high school. Like, that's the thing in football. If you're going up, you always have to prove something. I don't care who it is. You could be the number one overall pick in the NFL draft. You have to prove that your game translates from college to the pros. You can go from high school to FBS, but if you don't play much on the FBS level, then you do need to prove when you come to the FCS level that you can still translate. Because it's not about, oh, well, he came from New Mexico, now he's at Fordham. Of course he's going to do great. I don't subscribe to that. And I think a lot of people do. I personally don't. If you go to a bigger school and you don't do anything at that school, and when I say don't do anything, I legitimately mean don't play or barely get time on the field. If you are relatively unproven, then I am now looking at your high school tape and saying, does that translate? I'm not going to assume that you're going to be great just because you came from a bigger school. I don't think that that's true. We see a lot of people who just don't pan out, period. And if you perform worse on the FBS level, I really don't care because you're not competing at that subdivision anymore. This is what is more applicable. Like, take a player who struggles on the FCS and then balls out on a D2 level. If he's transferred to another D2 school, you probably have confidence he's going to ball out again. Anyway, I've done all of this, but let me break down what he did, because I didn't want to just give you the accolades, but I did expect to give you the accolades or get to the accolades first for CJ Montes. Excuse me. So he was a 2023 or 2024 preseason All-American, stats perform 3rd team. He was a 2024 preseason All-Patriot League, named the 4th best returning NCAA FCS quarterback. Okay, now I'm reading these things. But so you look at what he did in his 2023 season and then what he got from that. So in 2023, he was a 2nd team All-Patriot League. He was a Walter Payton Award finalist. So you know that means that he was at a very high level because he was considered one of the best offensive players in the country on the FCS level. He was a full-time starter for the first time and only time. That's the thing. He's only started one full season. I would take that as his biggest sample size and the most applicable sample size when trying to look at what FAMU is going to get out of the quarterback and what happened in that season. In that season, he had 3,000 yards even. He had 26 touchdowns and only 1 interception. A 26-1 touchdown to interception ratio in a single season starting at Fordham. That is a phenomenal level of accuracy, or excuse me, efficiency. His 64% completion percentage displays his high level of accuracy. 12.4 yards per attempt. He had 3 rushing touchdowns as well. So you're looking at a guy who, I'm not about to call him a dual threat. He just had 3 rushing touchdowns. You're looking at a guy who really threw the football effectively, safely, but still got good production, you know? And that 3,000 yards, it led the conference. And after his strong season, so after that strong season of leading the Patriot League in passing yards per game, he was top 10 in the country in passing yards per game. Like, just really hear what I'm talking about. 5 300-yard passing games, 1 400-yard passing game, led the conference in passing touchdowns, 8th in the country in passing touchdowns, 9th in the country in passing yards per game, 10th in the country in completions per game, right? He was 2nd in the conference when it came to completion percentage, and he was top 15 in passing efficiency. This dude had a really good year. If we're talking about CJ Montes, I understand he had 2 years. He's been in college for 4 years. 2 of those was spent in New Mexico, barely playing. His last season ended after only 3 games, and he suffered an injury. So if there's only 1 year in which he played a full allotment of games where he was a full-time starter, why would I look at any other year as if it was more applicable to what FAMU is getting? The only question mark is, how is that injury going to affect him? Because when he was on the field, he was one of the most efficient. He was one of the most accurate. He was one of the most highly touchdown producing quarterbacks. He was one of the top quarterbacks in the country, right? Like, if we're taking 2023, he was top 15 in efficiency, yards, touchdowns, completion percentage was high in the conference, in the country as well. Excuse me. You're looking at a guy who was a preseason All-American. He was a preseason All-Conference player. He was a guy who was a Walter Payton finalist. What do you want from your quarterback that he doesn't provide you in that? That is quality play. And I think that Daniel Richardson was a good quarterback. I enjoyed when I watched him play. I thought he was very shifty in the pocket. I thought that he had good pocket awareness and everything. But he's gone now. and you need another quarterback to lead the charge. We're already talking about is the dark cloud defense back, but what about the offense? The offense has to do something. I find it rare that I'm excited about a transfer portal addition in the spring. Typically, I just don't look at those highly. I don't have much expectations for them. Quarterback is one of the times when I have my exceptions, and CJ Montes is one of those exceptions. When he was at Fordham for the 1 year, for the single year that he was at Fordham as a starting quarterback for an entire year, he was all conference. He was efficient. He produced touchdowns. He only threw one interception to 26 touchdowns. That's the type of player that FAMU's getting. That's a huge grab. And unless the injury completely debilitated him, that's the type of player that you're going to get when you're talking about the Rattlers. Now, as we push forward, I want to look at some of the draft conversations that we had because you have UDFAs and you also have rookie minicamp invites. And I want to break down both of those as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, and I'm going to tell you right now, there is nothing like the heat of playoff basketball. That environment, that atmosphere, every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment just feels huge. I couldn't even imagine being in the arena when the Timberwolves were storming back on the Lakers. That would be like a dream. I had fun sitting in my room, but I want you to feel that moment for you if you're in a city that has a game. So last minute deals doesn't matter. You're still going to get the best prices, and they're going to save you up to 60% on any of the offers. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. So if I were you, I would download the Game Time app. I have it on my phone. So if I were you, I would definitely do it. Download the app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege. If you do that, you get $20 off your first purchase. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On NBA. It's the playoffs, and it's time for you to tune in, tap in, and make sure you stay educated on the biggest games of the year. On yesterday's episode, we broke down who was drafted. It was a short breakdown. It was only Carson Vinson. The Alabama A&M offensive tackle. There was no other draftees, but we did spend the entirety of the show breaking down the draft, recapping it, everything that went into it. And one of the questions that I asked at the beginning was, how surprised are you? I asked that question for anybody who missed yesterday's show, and I will also quickly and briefly recap my stance. I was a solid 6 out of 10 because I expected something different, but I can't say that I was shocked. I don't even know if stunned wasn't the word, shocked wasn't the word. I don't know if surprise was even the word, but I was caught off guard. I thought that we would have more HBCU prospects drafted in this one, probably just one more. But I want to break down the UDFAs and the camp invites because the truth of the matter is this is what is most important for us. I would love if one day we're able to say we can get 4 or 5 HBCU players drafted. And it's funny because it doesn't feel too crazy to me. The idea of having 4 to 5 HBCU players drafted on a regular basis doesn't feel insane because we have so many schools. But right now it is insane. That's just the truth of it. I can talk about how things should be, but what about how things are? And how they are is you're not going to get a lot of HBCU representation nearing the 200 and something picks in the NFL draft. But what you will get is the majority of our prospects will get UDFA contracts and they will get rookie mini camp invites. And I want to break down the ones who got what, like which category that they fall in. I'm going to go, excuse me, Kendall Bowler, FAMU. These are the undrafted free agents. Kendall Bowler, FAMU, Denver Broncos. North Carolina Central's Joaquin Davis, Denver Broncos. North Carolina A&T's Jason Ivey, Cleveland Browns. Jackson State's Robert McDaniel, Washington Commanders. And then South Carolina State's Aaron Smith, New York Jets. So you got 2 Broncos, but it's pretty spread out over there. Then on the rookie minicamp side, you have Howard's Robert Jones with the Indianapolis Colts and Kansas City Chiefs. North Carolina Central's Quantez Mansfield, Minnesota Vikings. Jackson State's Irv Mulligan, New York Giants. Jackson State's Phillip Webb, Miami Dolphins. Morgan State's Elijah Williams, Minnesota Vikings. So I'll tell you the one that's easily the biggest shocker to me, and that was Elijah Williams. I was stunned to see Elijah be in the rookie minicamp section. That surprised me because, in general, he's a beast. He's dominant. We're talking about one of the more dominant forces. We're talking about a guy that we've hyped up being one of the top prospects, dominated the HBCU Legacy Bowl. I felt like every test we talk about tests with Carson Vinson, well, these other players had tests as well. Were they? It's almost like you. Okay, so you have midterms, right? Obviously, you have midterms, and those are the type of tests that Carson Vinson was going through. He had midterms, finals, SAT, ACT, like big tests that everybody is watching for. But I think a lot of these, as you're going through the draft process, it's not just the combine and the Senior Bowl. It's not just that. For some of these guys, it's just literally the test that you have throughout the semester in the class. It's not a midterm. It's not an ACT. It's not an SAT to get into college. It's just test. And I thought that Elijah Williams aced that test at the HBCU Legacy Bowl because people are talking about this was the best Legacy Bowl performance that they've ever seen. People are talking about how dominant he was, how it translates quickly. Everything lined up for him to at least be a UDFA. And I'll tell you what went through my brain. So when I seen the UDFAs, and this is not in comparison to Williams, but when I seen Bowler and I seen Davis, the first thing that jumped to my mind was great athleticism. That was the very first thing that came to my mind was great athleticism. For Bowler, it's on the field. He was on the freaks list for his athletic ability. And then for Joaquin Davis, I talked about this when it happened during the HBCU Legacy Bowl, the HBCU Combine. I knew his athletic ability would put him on the radar of somebody, and it put him on the radar of at least the Broncos. I don't know who else was involved in this, but at least the Broncos were a team that put him on the radar. When you run a 4.44, when you're built like Joaquin Davis at wide receiver, you are going to catch some eyes at that speed. Of course. I think I harped on it for months and months. Joaquin Davis, he's this. Not even months and months, because months and months ago. But I was like, yo, Joaquin Davis this is his build. This is his build. This is his build. And I know what a prototypical just frame can do for a player. Because we're not just talking about HBCUs. We're talking about every school. If you have a build that a team feels like they can morph, either put on a little bit of weight or you're already close to, they like 6'3" wide receivers, you're 6'4". We like 6'3" wide receivers who can run a 4.45 or less. And you're a 6'5" guy who runs a 4.2 or a 4.41 or whatever. You fit that mold. So they're going to get a chance, and it's a UDFA. Take a flyer on them, whatever, right? So then I started thinking, how did I feel about Elijah's athleticism? So I go to the RAS score and I look, and it's in the green. It's good, yeah. But let's break down that green at a little bit, just let's break it down a little bit closer. Let's look at this a little deeper. So he has an 8.27, which is cool. It's cool. Like, I like that. It's in the green, so we're taking it. Agility, elite. Speed, good. He had a great 10-yard, but the long speed, nah. You're looking at 20-yard split. I actually think this 40-yard dash is wrong. I think he ran in the 4.1s. Here they have him 4.2 flat. But explosion, his vert is in the green, but his broad is in the yellow. So I'm looking at these things like, the 10-yard split should be all that matters for somebody his size, but they question it at 288 if it's a size. Questioning his broad. So I think if you just have question marks at all, rookie minicamp. I'm trying to find reasons because I'm thinking he's a good athlete. I'm liking the numbers he's putting up. But I look at the RAS score and it's not quite at a 9. I'm looking at Morgan State not having a lot of P4 competition over his time. I'm looking at these things, and I see Kendall Bowler, I see Joaquin Davis who get UDFA contracts. And to me, a big reason they get that contract is athleticism. And I've talked about the importance of athleticism. I've talked about the importance of a RAS score, or excuse me, a RAS, because the S stands for score. But that was disappointing. That was disappointing to not see Elijah there. I think same thing for Irv Mulligan. Maybe the speed being a problem, but he gets a minicamp. To me, these are two UDFAs, and they end up dropping to rookie minicamp. And I think that the Giants and also the Vikings could get steals. But what's the difference between a UDFA and a and a difference between a UDFA and a rookie minicamp. UDFA, you get guaranteed money off rip. You get 30K. Boom. Some people it differs by person, but you get 30K. Boom, easily. Rookie minicamp invite, you get invited, and if you ball out, then you get a contract. But there's no guarantees there, and I think UDFA's are more likely to have a hold a spot. It's more cemented that you'll make it to camp. These guys, you come in rookie minicamp, whatever. We just want to get a look at you, So disappointing. Disappointing. But anyway, let's push forward and look at the HBCU to P4 pipeline results, because that's often a thing that people talk about. But how well did it really pan out for guys, and where are some of these players landing? Let's look at that as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and the Cavaliers versus Heat is tomorrow or tonight. You have the Pistons versus Knicks tonight. You have a couple of big games going on Tuesday afternoon, evening to nighttime. But I wanted to break down the Pistons versus the Knicks because they have a 4-game same leg or 4-leg same game parlay. You have the Knicks on the money line. OG Anunoby score 15. Jalen Brunson gets 8 assists, and Karl Anthony Towns makes 3. I think that the Pistons are going to win. So you take that money line with the Pistons, and I think you have a whole different conversation. That's what I think ends up winning. But that's me. In general, the Pistons are a 5.5-point underdog. But they have so many great things on FanDuel. You can have the first basket. Who's going to score it? First team basket. If you don't feel confident that one team is going to score the first basket, you go ahead and just say, I think Cade Cunningham is going to score first for the Pistons. I think that Josh Hart is going to score first for the Knicks. You just pick your poison and you have it, but you have to go to FanDuel in order to do it. Take advantage of all of the NBA action. And if you're new to FanDuel, you get $250 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. We talk about the HBCU to Power 4 pipeline, and there's 2 reasons that people do it: money and drafted. We don't have to talk about the money right now. That's not what the discussion is. But instead, let's focus on the getting drafted part. I think that so often we see players who don't get drafted after transferring to a P4 and say, see, you should have stayed at an HBCU. I don't agree with this. This is my personal opinion. I think that is the wrong approach. I understand. I try not to question the result too much if the logic makes sense. And the truth is, the NFL has been showing us for the past couple of years how they value non-P4 programs. And that goes for G5 schools as well. They tell you how they value non-P4 programs. They know, I'm talking about the players, they know my best opportunity is probably to go somewhere where I'm going to have the most eyes. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I think until we start producing more HBCU draftees, I don't think that we have much room to stand on, because let's say that this kid goes from South Carolina State to South Carolina and he ends up not getting drafted, but he has a solid time at South Carolina, but he just doesn't get drafted. Are we going to say, see, you should have stayed at South Carolina State? Same result. No, that doesn't really make sense because we know which one gives better odds, But there were 4 players who came from the HBCU ranks, moved to a P4 school, ended up getting drafted. The most interesting one to me is the now Washington Commander, Ja'Cory Merritt, because I didn't think he was that great at Alabama State. I didn't think he had much production. He had less than 500 yards in each season that he was there. But then he goes to New Mexico, and that guy went crazy. I think he had nearly 1,200, maybe a little bit over 1,200 yards in his 3-year span at Alabama State. He had 1,190 at New Mexico. 7th most in school history by a running back. He really put himself on the map there. And then unfortunately, some some eligibility issues. It could be tied to anything. I don't want to say it's academic, but he had some eligibility issues that kept him out of 2024 outside of just a game. So there's a very small sample size. It's kind of similar to what we were talking about with Montes, but but this was for the draft, excuse me. And I thought that Merritt performed well in his season at New Mexico. He came in, he was the offensive player of the game at the Shrine Bowl. So he's doing what he needed to do to prove himself. And talk about proving himself. Oh my God, but sure too. I don't usually care how players perform when they leave HBCUs, but in this situation, I was pretty ecstatic because I really did like what Tootin was able to do at North Carolina A&T. I watched what he did at Virginia Tech, and he performed really well while he was there. He ends up going 104th overall. So this was big time. He was the second highest drafted HBCU to FBS player, and he earned that. He shut down the combine, showed his athleticism. He did what he needed to do. Travis Hunter was going to be an elite prospect, and I think he was going to be a first-round pick no matter what. I really do. I just really think that's what he would have been. Because if you'd have played at Jackson State for 3 years, the Senior Bowl, I think, started inviting non-seniors. I don't like that, but I think they started doing it. He could have came in. Same with the Shrine Bowl guys, I think. So I think he would end up being a first-round pick no matter what, but he ended up being number 2 overall. He ended up winning the Heisman. Maybe the trajectory is just different. But Shedeur Sanders, I think Shedeur goes undrafted if he stays at Jackson State. I'm going to be honest with you. I saw what point they went to prove while he was at Colorado. I don't know if, and this isn't just, I think that there was a point to prove. I think that, I don't want to sound too conspiracy theorist like, but I believe he was better than a 5th round quarterback. That's my belief. And I think with Shedeur, I think that the way they handled it along the way probably rubbed some people the wrong way. Do they handle it that way if he's at Jackson State? I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. But I think that the media that followed Shedeur throughout this process, the idea that he was only going to play for a certain set of people, that got cleared up as we went down the line. But there's just, quite frankly, some people who don't like Deion Sanders and the way he handles himself. And I think that there is an idea that could rub off on Shedeur. And is it fair? Is it unfair? Maybe a little bit of both. I lean more to the unfair side, but it's a little bit of both. And I'll say this. If he stays at Jackson State and he handles it this way of, I'm big time, he might not have seen the field. And I don't think that that's overly pessimistic. But to say he was a 5th round pick at Colorado after everything he did there, what he could have done in Jackson State, I could have seen him being even lower if drafted at all. So I think he's talented enough. I think he showed himself to be talented enough at J-State, but I'm just talking about how things go. That's just how things go. Speaking of Jackson State, we're going to talk about the little wide receiver carousel they got going on. It's weird timing over there with Isaiah Spencer, Nate Rember. It's just a lot going on in the Jackson State receiving corps, and I want to break down all of it on tomorrow's episode. Happy for Shedeur. Wish he would have got drafted earlier. I think he deserved to be drafted earlier, but I think that process rubbed people the wrong way. They rub people the wrong way from everything that I've been hearing before the draft and then the immediate afterwards of the draft as well, aftermath of the draft as well. But anyway, we'll be back with that tomorrow. In the meantime, between time, until next time we hear you, the family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.